We started this conversation last week on a generous life. And we started by talking about the fact that we're good at giving, okay? But giving isn't the same as living a generous life. We're good at these random acts of kindness, random acts of giving, right? You come out of Stop and Shop and there's those kids there and they look like they really need their cheerleading group to have new uniforms, and you go and you give them something, you go, I'm so generous, but that's a random act of giving. That's not living a life of generosity. Your neighbor down the street, something happens and you chip in and you help them out and you're part of giving, but we're talking about this next level. We're talking about not random acts of giving. We're talking about ordering our lives around generosity. We're talking, I think this is on, because it's really loud up here for some reason, and I'm ringing. Everything's beautiful? Everybody good? Do I sound loud? I sound loud? I do. Okay, can we bring me down just a little bit? I love me as much as you all do, but too much of me is just too much of me, right? Okay, a lot of you are like really into, yes, too much of you is definitely too much of you, okay? And just a little bit of me is too much of me for some people. Right, Magnum? Your show comes back out tomorrow. I'm very excited about this. His acting career is back. Yeah. No, it's some new guy. Yeah. Well, we have Tom Selleck here, you know. He's signing things, right? So I'm on the next one, Meg. So we're this idea of living a generous life is the next level. There's giving, but ordering our lives around generosity goes beyond that. And that's what we're talking about over these couple of weeks here. We're talking about the next level, moving into a life that is ordered around generosity. So I gave you a really clunky definition of generosity. I found it from Andy Stanley. I just thought it was really good. It's kind of clunky, but it's good. It really gives us the idea of what generosity is, right? So we said this. We said generosity is the premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation of our personal financial assets. Okay? Will you say that with me? Generosity is the premeditated, calculated, designated, emancipated, right? Personal financial assets. Okay? So what's that mean? Premeditated means I've already made a decision. I've already decided where my money is going to go. It's premeditated. It's not random. It doesn't happen because somebody made me feel guilty or somebody talked me into it. It's premeditated. It's already going there, right? Calculated means I've set a budget and I'm living within that, and generosity is included in my working budget. Designated means it's already going there. I do it. For some of us here at church, you can think of it this way. We have automatic online giving. So it's the same thing when we're talking about generosity. It's designated. It's going there. It's in my budget. I know where it's going, and I've already decided it. It's happening. It's designated. Emancipation, I love this one the most, right? Because we talked about this fact, Jesus talks about this too, that when we set our money free, what happens? We're free. Either we have our stuff, or our stuff has us. For too many of us, our stuff has us. So what we're talking about over these 4 weeks is learning to be generous with our finances. Learning to be generous with our finances. Now let me say this. I said this last week. Let me say it again this week. I'm not trying to get anything from you, okay? So I want you to look at the person next to you and say, leave the man alone. Just go ahead, tell him. Okay? Just leave him alone. I don't want anything from you. Okay? We're not trying to get anything from you. I want to show you. Now listen. I don't have this down. I want to say that from the beginning. I don't have this down. Lori and I are learning these right along with everybody else. We're working towards this because here's what we found. We don't like living a life that we're paying for stuff we already have. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, okay? Living a life constantly paying for things I already have. So there's a better way to live, okay? So the first thing you may think is, well, Pastor Paul, if I feel like there's a need, or if I move towards it, if I moved by compassion, if I moved by somebody, then I could be a generous person. But listen, generous people don't need to be sold or guilted into giving. Listen, because they've already ordered their lives, their world around generosity. And so when the appeal is made, or there's a situation that's made, they don't go, oh, okay, well, their lives are already there. They're already living generously. Now, here's what happens whenever a conversation like this is started. We go, I can't afford to be generous. Listen, if I were a millionaire, I'd be so generous you can't even imagine. If I had a nickel for every time I've had somebody say to me, when I win the lottery, I'm going to pay the church off. If I had the nickel for everybody who said that to me, I could pay the church off. Right? Because we have this idea that when I have more, then I'll be able to be generous. Can I tell you something? When you become generous, if you didn't write this down last week, write this down this week, okay? You will give more, you will save more, and you will consume less. It's not up on the board, so let me say it for you again if you want to write it down. You will give more, you will save more, and you will consume less. Unless you're a hoarder, okay? Now, if you're somebody who hoards money, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to cost you something. Generosity is going to cost you something. Because you're already hoarding it. You're keeping it. We're going to talk about that a little bit as we go on. Okay, I'm going to give you Jesus' promise here. You ready? Now listen, remember, I don't want anything from you. I'm not trying to get anything from you. Jesus says this, if you'll learn this concept and you'll live this way, guess what will happen? You'll live a blessed life. That word blessed means happy. In other words, Jesus says, if you'll live like this, you'll be happier. Wife, go ahead, hit your husband. Do it. Get it out of the way. You know you want to. I want to be happier. I want you to be happier. Okay? So, last week we talked about this. We talked about the blessed life, right, is a life where we understand that it's more blessed to what? Give than to, right? We all know Jesus' words. Paul quotes Jesus. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. It's more happy to give than, and we talked about this idea that yeah, right, okay. I'm happy when I give, but let's be honest, Pastor Paul, I'm also really happy when I receive. But Jesus says there's more blessing, we're happier, and our lives are blessed when we get this concept that when we give, and we order our lives, not a one-time giving, right? Ordering our lives around generosity. So Jesus is talking about those who change their lifestyle and order their lives around generosity. He says this, they will be happy. They will be happy. Check this out. Surveys tell us this, that most Americans, you ready? When I talk about most Americans, I'm not talking about 51%. When I talk about most Americans, surveys show us that 90% feel financial pressure. 90% of Americans feel financial pressure because we've not learned to be generous. So today I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to get the whiteboard out. Whoa. Okay? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your notes. You see the side that has the words on it? Turn it over to that side that has a circle. We're going to fill that circle in at the very, very end of this part of it, okay? But when we talk about this, okay, when we talk about our finances, and I'm sorry about those who are over here. If you want to move, you might want to because I think it's going to be hard, and I apologize. We try to do everything we can. But this is worth catching, so it's worth moving if you want to move. Maybe our ushers can, if you're on the ends, could you just move in so we can make room for those that are over here? Can you do that for me today? Thank you. Did you love seeing all these folks here filling up our new building? This is great. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Can you see? Is my fat head in the way? Okay. All the way at the top, here's what I want you to write. I want you to write this word. You ready? I have horrible handwriting, and I'll probably misspell a lot of stuff. Okay? The word that we associate most with money is worry. Is worry, right? Will I ever have enough? Will I ever have enough to retire? Will I have enough to buy that car? Will I have enough to buy that house? Will I have enough to get out of debt? No matter how much money we make, at the end of the day, 90% of us, we worry. We're worried about all these things. And the reason that we worry, you ready? Over here, is because we spend. We worry because we spend, right? And here's what happens. We spend more, we spend all or more of what we make. Whoops. We spend all or more of what we make. And so what is the result? Debt. Right? So, of course I'm worrying because I make $20, but I'm spending $22. Or I'm spending $20. Everything that comes in, what do? It goes out. And here's what happens with our debt. You ready? We buy it, and what happens to it? The value of it does what? The moment we buy it, the moment you drive it out, the moment you put it on, it does what? Goes down. And the price goes up. So what do you have? You've got debt on something that's already worth less than what you're paying for it at whatever percent interest. Okay? So what does all this lead to? No financial, whoops, that's a C, margin. I got no space. So something happens, something goes on. Now, listen, can I talk to everybody who's 30 years and younger? Listen to me. Listen to me. All the moms and dads are saying, yes, please, please, please. I can change your life today. Listen, listen, listen. Don't get yourself in. Listen to what I'm saying. If you catch these principles, it will save your life. A lot of heartache down the road, okay? No financial margin, right? And what does this do, right? It's all leading. One's leading to the other, to the other. And what do? We, say it with me, worry. We're back to worry. And what is this? This is the American way. This is how we live, right? Spend more than we make. We get ourselves in debt, right? We have no financial margin, and we're a mess, okay? So what are we actually worrying about? Are we worrying that we're not going to have food on our table? Right? Can you see? You want me to move this? Let me see if I can. Is that better? Okay. Are we worried about not having gas in our car? Are we worried ultimately that we're not going to have food, our kids aren't going to be clothed? No, no. What we're really worried about is future consumption. Right? Will I be able to have the nicer car? Will I be able to have the bigger house? Will I be able to have nicer furniture? That's what we're ultimately really worried about, because we have what we need. We're really worried about what we want. Right? So what does this do? Right? We consume more than we can afford. Whoops. Right? We go to the car dealership. What do? They put us in a car, and we say, I can do that, but I won't be able to eat lunch. I'll just give up lunch for the next 6 years so I can have my new Honda Accord. Right? Because it's cherry red. And so, I'm sorry about my handwriting, folks. We consume more than we can afford. And what's this called? What's this called? It's called consumer debt. Think about that term for a second. Consumer debt. Not put food on the table debt. Not pay for your mortgage, but we keep getting bigger mortgages. It's consumer debt. We're paying on stuff we already own, when we could buy it cheaper if we paid for it with cash, if we bought it when we could afford it, if we saved up for it. Instead, we buy it at 6%, 7%, 12%, 29%, 19% interest. And what do we have? No financial margin, right? What's really our no financial margin? It's for future consumption. Well, I've got myself hocked up so far. I'm so in debt that I can't have the next Honda Accord. What a bummer, right? And here we are. We're worrying about what? Future consumption. And what drives this mindset is this. We have this idea that if it comes to me, it's for me. If it comes to me, it's for me, right? Because I have to take care of me. Let me ask you a question this morning. How much money, how much money would it take, or how much money would you need? Let me put it that way. How much money would you need to stop spending all or more of what you make? If your boss came to you tomorrow and gave you a 10% raise, would you live just like you do now and start using that money to pay off your debt? 10%, 15%, 20%? Guess what the answer is? The answer is more money than you'd make than you would receive at one time. The answer is more money than you would receive at one time. Because here's why. Over time, our income increases, and what happens? So does our spending, right? And we continue, our income increases, our spending increases. And we do this every time we get a raise, don't we? We don't go, okay, here's the cutoff, here's the end of it, okay? I've made as much as I want to make, I'm happy, I'm content, I'm satisfied. We make more, we spend more. We make more, we hoard more. We make more, we consume more. So here's the issue. Our money isn't the issue, okay? Money isn't the issue. What is self-control. Let me change colors here. Make these a little easier, I'm sorry. Right? We don't have a money issue. What we have is a self-control issue. I want it, I get it. I want it, I use my credit card. I tell myself I need it, so I spend it. Somehow I justify in order to consume more. So how much money, right, would we need to pay off all of our credit cards and start using only cash for purchases? If your boss came and gave you a 10% raise, 15%, 20%, how much money would it take? How much money would it take to pay off all of our debt, right, and stay out of debt? 10%? If you got a 10% raise, okay, I'm staying where I'm at, I'm paying everything off. 15%? 20%? What's the answer? The answer is more than you're going to get at any one time. The reality is, as our income goes up, so do our habits. What's the old saying? Men are just boys with more expensive toys. Right? See, debt isn't a money issue. It's a contentment issue. Debt isn't a money issue. Your money isn't what the problem is. My money isn't what the problem is. It's a contentment issue. I want it. So I tell myself I need it. Right? How much money would you need to create financial margin? Put away a little bit. Have an emergency fund. 10%? 15? 20? The answer again, it's more than we get at any one time. So, we have a self-control issue with spending. We have a contentment issue with debt, right? Our financial margin. We have a discipline. It's not a money issue. It's a discipline issue. I just refuse to put the money back. I just refuse to save. I just refuse to put away. I just refuse to create margin. As my income goes up, my spending goes up. As my income goes up, my habits increase. It's not a money issue. It's a discipline issue. I've met plenty and plenty and plenty of millionaires who worry incessantly about money. We think if we could put another zero behind our income, we'd be all right. But the reality is, the zeros only create more worry. Because what happens? We spend up to that level. Right? We don't know very many millionaires who have small homes. They have big homes with nicer cars, faster cars, shinier cars. So, it's not a money issue. Our worry isn't a money issue. You know what our worry is? Our worry is a spiritual issue. See, Jesus said this. Jesus said, we worry, listen, catch this. This is the heart of it. Jesus said we worry because we put our trust in riches rather than putting our trust in the one who richly provides. Let me say that again. Jesus said we worry because we put our trust in our riches, we put our trust in our money, we put our trust in wealth, rather than putting our trust in the one who richly provides. Now, flip your piece of paper over. Here's the truth. More money does not create more self-control. More money does not create more discipline. And more money does not create contentment. More money does not create more self-control. More money does not create more discipline. And more money does not create more contentment. Why? Because discontentment is like an appetite. The more you feed it, the more it wants. Right? The more you give it, the more it needs. The more you feed it, the more it wants to consume. In other words, the reason we are discontented is because, not because we have so little, but because we have so much. If you've traveled the world and you've been able to go to any third world countries, the thing people come back and say every time we go to Haiti, every time I take someone to a third world country, every single time on the plane ride back, people go, I just can't believe how happy these folks are. Why are they happy? Because they have little. They're not on this consumer debt spinning wheel. More money doesn't eradicate worry. More money only adds another zero to your spending habits, to your debt, to your lack of margin. That's all it does. Just puts another zero behind the habits you already possess, that you already have, that I already have. Generous people, on the other hand, people who order their lives around generosity and other people aren't caught in this cycle that we're going to call the consumption assumption. The consumption assumption. You ready? The consumption assumption says this: if it comes to me, it's for me. If it comes my way, then it must be for me. Generous people don't think that way. Because, listen, our idea of generosity is if you inspire me enough, if you guilt me enough, if enough other people are doing it, well, then I'll jump in. That's our idea of generosity. But at the heart of it is this: I'm not going to give you so much that it affects my lifestyle. And we think, it comes to me, it's for me. So I'll give you a little bit, but there's no way you're going to affect how I live, because what comes to me is for me. And you know what Jesus called this lifestyle? Greed. Greed. That's a tough word. That's hard to swallow. We don't like that word. Greed is this, in your notes. Greed is the assumption it's all about my consumption. Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. And you know what the problem with greed is? Can I tell you something? You can't see greed in the mirror. Nobody looks in the mirror and goes, wow, I'm a greedy person. That's a greedy person looking back at me. We look in the mirror and we think of somebody else. We see other people. It's always someone else who's greedy. Man, they're greedy. I mean, you won't even give, you won't even do, you won't. It's easy to see in other people, but we never see it in ourselves. Jesus says that real greed is assuming it all belongs to me. That it comes to me, it's for me. Guess where greed leads to? Greed leads to worry. You ready? See, we want this circle, what we want it to say is blessed. But guess what this all leads to? Discontentment. Oh! That looks horrible. Oh my goodness. I need to have my wife come in the second service and do all the writing. I don't ever write with my hand. Is anybody else like that? Like I start writing, I do 2 sentences and my hand's already cramped up. I'll do little thank you notes every so often, and I can't even get through the whole little 3 sentences because my hand, See, at the end of this cycle, we always end up back at worry, and it always, 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 always leads to discontentment. In your notes, most financial angst is the result, ready, of wanting what we can't get and not needing what we don't have. See, it's not about meeting our physical needs. It's about wanting more and more and more and more. We tell ourselves, he who wins, right? The winner is the one who has the most toys at the end of the game. But the reality is, we're going to see this in just a moment, the person who has the most toys at the end of the game, guess what? They're just dead. Whether you have no toys or all the toys, you're just dead. Here's the truth. If we got what we wanted, think about what you want. New couch, new dress, new car, new house. Bob, that boat. We went to a boat show last weekend. Wow. You know what's great about being poor? I did not have one, there There was not a moment where I was about to buy anything. I was not tempted at all. The greatest thing about being poor, no temptation. We went to this one boat. I'll tell this. We go to this one boat, and they have it crossed off, and you could only go by appointment. So I said to the lady, I said, "So can we make an appointment to check out this boat?" She leans in, she goes, "Do you really have the finances to be able to afford this boat?" No. But I'd sure like to look at it. Listen, if we got what we really wanted, think about the thing you really want. You'd already be thinking about the next, the bigger, the faster, the shinier, right? Get into that new house, think about the next one, bigger yard. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to expand it? How are we going to, right? Get into a boat. They say the two best days of a boat owner's lives are the day they buy it and the day they sell it, right? It's all about another 3 feet, another 2 feet, whatever it is. You just keep buying a bigger, shinier, faster. That's the truth of it, because we're always looking for the next. And the result of all this is just greater and greater. That says discontentment, I promise. Greater and greater discontentment. Learning to be generous. Organizing our lives around generosity, it crushes the consumption assumption. Okay, so I have like 8.5 minutes to preach half of my sermon. You guys still with me? Is this making sense? Okay. This generosity is learning to organize our lives around generosity. It crushes the consumption assumption, right? In 2 weeks, we're going to get real practical. You want to be here, and parents, bring your kids in 2 weeks. You really want your kids to be here and get this, okay? But today, here's what we're going to do. We have to change the way we think. We can't change how we act until we change how we think. As a man thinks, so is he, right? So we have to change how we think before we can change how we act. So I want to talk to you about this idea of generosity, right? We're breaking through the consumption assumption, right? And generous people realize that if it comes to them, it's not necessarily for them. Just because it comes to you doesn't mean it's for you. And this is learning how to be generous. So one day, Jesus, he's talking to his disciples, and he stops and he shares a parable with them. Now, what's a parable? A parable's not a real story. It's a story that Jesus made up to teach a greater truth. Okay? So there's a moral to the story that Jesus has. That's what a parable is. So Jesus stops the disciples right in what they're doing, and he begins to share this story with them. It's found in Luke chapter 12. It'll be up on the screens, but if you have a Bible, you want to follow along, you can. We're going to start in verse 16. And here's what it says. It says, Jesus told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. Now we read that first sentence and we go, wow, God is blessing this guy. This is awesome, right? And the man said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for my crops. And he said, I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store my wheat and my other goods. Now here's what this guy does. This guy does what he always had done before. He does what he always did. Now, ask yourself, what do you do when you get more? You do what you always did. We do the same thing. We do what we always do. Whatever you normally do, you get more, and guess what you do? You do what you do. You do you. Same habit. You get more, and you either hoard, consume, or you spend it. He did what he always did. Listen, he did what he always did because he assumed what he always assumed. And that is this: if it comes to me, it's for me. And so, in your notes, he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it now so I can consume it later. I'm going to save it now so I could consume it later. See, getting more didn't make him generous. Getting more just made him richer. The idea that when I get more, then I can afford to be generous. He breaks through that. He answers our question for us, doesn't he? He got more, and what did he do? Well, I got to keep it. It's mine. I've got to hoard it. I've got to make sure that I have it. So, at a later date, I can consume it. Ask yourself this. Go back 20, 30 years. I want you to go back 20, 30 years and meet your 20, 30-year-old younger self. Right? Picture this. You go back and you meet them and you say, in 20, 30 years, you're going to be making, and tell them how much you're making right now. Your younger self would probably say, oh my goodness, I am going to be out of debt. I'm going to have margin. Life is going to be good. If I was making what I'm making 20, 30 years from now, I would have absolutely no financial worries. I'd be set. Life would be so good. Yet here we are today, totally worried about money and debt and getting what? More. Not getting through, not getting by, not feeding ourselves, getting more. Through the years, we continue to do, just like this man did, we've continued to do what we always have done before. If it comes to me, it's for me. Let's continue on. Verse 19, he says, and I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, I love this part, my friend, I like how he talks to himself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. You've heard that saying before. You didn't know it came from Jesus, did you? Eat, drink, and be merry. Now this guy, he's a little different than the rest of us because he's older. He's older. And he says, I'm done. I can retire now. I can save it so I can consume it. So I'm checking out, and I'm going to take care of me and only me for the rest of my life, however long that is. Let me tell you how long it was, verse 20. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Jesus calls him a fool. Not for being rich. There's nothing wrong with being rich. Don't take any of these messages as a repudiation against having money, being wealthy. There's nothing wrong with being rich. Jesus doesn't say that there's anything wrong with being rich. What he says is, what's wrong is thinking that it was for himself. The problem is misplaced priorities. See, he says, you thought that because you had lots of stuff, you had lots of years. That you're going to be able to consume it, that you're going to be able to have it, that it would be there for you. You assumed that you could consume everything. In other words, Jesus says you thought there was enough time, but tonight your life is required of you. Notice the question that Jesus poses. Notice the question, okay? The question that God asks the man, Jesus is asking every single one of us. Who will get everything you work for? Who's going to get everything you possess right now? Your car, your house, your clothes, that china, your golf clubs, Al. Your hot tub, Bob. I know. Who's going to get it? The answer is somebody else. Not because he was generous, but because he's dead. All the stuff he saved up to consume himself was consumed by somebody else. Think about that. everything we work so hard for, everything we're killing ourselves to get, everything that we just keep amassing. I mean, how many of us do not raise your hands? How many of us have storage? How many of us have stuff in our attics? How many of us have stuff in our basements? How many stuff, so much more that we, quit pointing at your wives, everybody, okay? You're killing me, okay? And wives are going to their husbands. How many of us have to take and actually pay money? I have a friend who got divorced 15 years ago, right? 15 years ago. He's been paying for 15 years, $300 a month on a storage unit with stuff that 15 years ago. Every time I see him, I'm like, dude, do you still have that storage unit? Don't talk about it. Like, and he doesn't even go see the stuff. It's just there. We do this. We store up. Now listen, Jesus steps out of the parable now. Jesus tells the parable. Now Jesus steps out of the parable, right? And this is what he says. Yes. A person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. See, Jesus says the person who consumes or hoards everything is a fool. Not my words. Don't walk out of here and go, Pastor Paul called me a fool. Not my words, okay? Red letters in your Bible. Jesus said it. The person who hoards everything, the person who consumes everything, right? Proverbs says, a fool and his money are soon parted. Why? Because he was rich? No. But because they're confused about their money. Now, here's the part of the sermon where you may be tempted to go, okay, Pastor. Okay, I need to be generous. So I'm not going to give God my money, but I'll be more generous with my time. I'll be more generous with my talent, okay? It's a different sermon, folks, because Jesus could not be clearer. He could not be clearer. It's about your money. Again, I don't want anything from you. Jesus is talking about money. So don't try and substitute here, because that's what we do sometimes. Okay, I'll be nicer to the person down the street. I'll try to, no. Jesus is after your money. Okay? He could not be clear about it. He's talking about wealth. Our relationship with God, Jesus says, right, is richer when we use our stuff, our wealth, to help others. Now, you may wonder, how can I be rich towards God? Because that's what Jesus says. We want to be rich towards God, right? Is it serving the church? No. Is it prayer life? No. Going to church every Sunday? Nope. Jesus says, you want to be rich towards me? Give stuff away. Don't consume it. Don't hoard it. Start giving it away. See, Jesus says the way to have less worry and the way to get out of this consumption assumption is living a generous lifestyle. It's organizing our lives around generosity. So how's this work? Let me get practical with you, okay? When we're rich towards the people that God loves, we're rich towards Him. Now, who does God love? Everybody. So when we're rich towards the people that God loves, we're rich towards Him. Can I tell you something? If you want to be rich towards me as your pastor, love my family. Take care of my wife and my kids. Do generous things to them, right? That's the way that you show love to me. It's the same for you, right? If somebody loves your spouse, loves your children, loves the people that you care about, the folks that you love dearly, your family, right? Because you want them to be cared for. If someone loves the people you love, it's like loving you. It's the same thing. See, our Heavenly Father, who needs nothing and owns everything, says that you and I, we are rich towards Him when we're rich towards others. God needs nothing. He owns everything. He can take whatever you have in a moment. Don't fool yourself. And He says, you want to be rich towards me? Love others. See, Jesus defined this as giving it away. In your notes, generous people don't assume it's theirs to consume. Generous people don't assume it's theirs to consume. Still with me? I know I'm longer than normal. Okay? We're going to bring this home. And guess what? It doesn't matter how much you have. We have this idea that if I had more, I'd be more generous. It's not about what we have. It's about a mindset. It's about how we think about what we have. Do I consume it? Do I hoard it? Or do I give it away? If it comes to me, is it for me? Or if it comes to me, is it for me to meet my needs and be generous to others? It doesn't matter how much you have. Wherever you're at financially, you can be a generous person. See, Jesus, He defies our concept of ownership. He does this by appealing to our common sense. And here's His point. Here's His point, right? If it can be taken away, you never owned it anyway. If it can be taken away, you never owned it anyway. Think about that. If someone else is going to get what you have, it was never yours in the first place. We're just managers, not owners. Everything you have today, everything you've ever had, everything you're going to have tomorrow, you're just a manager of it. You're not an owner of it, because if it can be taken away from you, you don't own it. Now, there's two ways that we can learn this, and they're both the hard way. The first way we can learn this is we lose everything. Divorce, fire, hurricane, IRS. They come, it's taken away. It's gone. See ya. Right? And guess what you realize when it's taken away? Wow, that was a lot easier than I thought it was. That was a lot faster than I thought it could be. I guess I never really owned it in the first place. Another way we can learn this is when our parents die or someone close to us. We did this recently with my grandmother's things. Just sat down, and the first thing we realized is a lot of her stuff was crap. My wife just put it, it's not a nice way to put it, I'm sorry if that offends you. It just is. Right? And you start going through stuff, and you do one of a couple things. You put it in a pile to put in your storage, right? You take it, you put it in your basement or your attic or your storage unit. Very seldom do we take somebody else's stuff and actually use it. Maybe, right? Or we give it away, or put a little lighter fluid on it and burn it. We throw it away, right? And we realize this when we're going through somebody else's stuff, that we're just managers. Guess what? Generous people think like this all the time. Because it's true. Everything you have, everything you've worked up so hard to get, that Apple Watch, man, it's going to be somebody else's someday. And they're going to look at it and go, man, this person has a lot of crap. Here's Jesus' point. Since it's all going to be taken away, why miss the opportunity to give it away? He says, you fool, tonight your life is required of you. You could have been generous, but you chose to be a hoarder. See, we miss out on the blessed life. We could put blessed in this instead of discontentment. We miss out on the blessed life because we live like owners. We live like consumers, thinking or acting like everything's ours. And living like an owner and a consumer always ends in discontentment, no matter how many zeros you put behind it. Now, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to trust me. But here's what I want you to do. Imagine life like this. Imagine life where you have what you need, and then you're generous. You just bless others, and you help them, and you serve them. Right? Generous people, they live like managers, not owners or consumers. It's not going to be mine forever. Somebody else is going to get it anyways. See, generous people understand that ownership is a myth. Consumption always leads to discontentment and worry. They realize that. They live like that. They order their lives around that understanding. Now, remember, I've said this a couple times, I don't want anything from you. I'm here to help you. So here's what you're going to do. I want you for the next 2 weeks, because next week we have the choir coming, okay? So we're going to jump back into this in 2 weeks. For the next 2 weeks, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about your stuff differently, right? Because we have to think differently before we could change anything, right? So for the next 2 weeks, we get homework. We're going to think about our stuff differently, okay? What can I do with my stuff? How can I be generous with my stuff, right? What can I give away? What can I love people with, right? How can I serve people with what I already have? Then, here's what we're going to learn. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to worry about it. Because our idea is, well, what if they take advantage of me? What if they break it? What if they use it improperly? If that happens to you, I want you to just think about this message and think, you know what? I'm just a manager of it. It's not mine anyways. I never had it. Because at the end of the day, everything you have, everything you're so worried about, someone's going to take it, they're going to pack it up, they're going to burn it, they're going to lose it. Because it's not yours. What would it look like? What would it feel like to live life like this? To live not like an owner, but like a manager. We're going to talk about that over the next couple weeks. 2 weeks from now, we're going to get real practical with this, okay? So, God has created us to be more than consumers. This is what I want you to catch. He's created us to be more than consumers, to be more than hoarders, okay? And it happens, all of this happens when we organize our lives around generosity. So I want to put a plug in for something. Could you go to the last one for me, Meg? There you go. Now, we didn't plan financial peace with this sermon series. I totally believe this is God, because I planned my sermon series in October for the next years, okay? And we didn't plan for financial peace until later this year. But you want to go real in-depth with this, we are going to start financial peace on October 4th. How many people have done financial peace here at the church? How many people who've gone through financial peace endorse financial peace? Every single person that raised their hands, okay? If you've not done this, you should, okay? So here's the deal. You can go online and you can register and you can buy your packet for $129. Or next Sunday, we'll have the packets here, okay? And we're going to give you a discount on it. If you buy it from us, you can get it for $120. We're going to knock almost $10 off of it. We're going to pay $10 for you to go to financial peace. Okay? We're going to sow that seed into it right from the beginning. You still have to go online to register, but next week we'll have the packets here. We don't have them yet. You go, I can't afford that. Listen to me. And every person who's gone through financial peace will tell you this, you can't afford not to. Okay? Get the $120. Okay? Ask somebody who went through financial peace. They'll give it to you. They have financial margin. They're loaded. Okay? I can't tell you enough good things about it. Go, do it. Start October 4th. It goes on Thursday nights to November 29th. Excellent, excellent, excellent way to order and really, really dig down and actually do this. We're going to talk about it in 2 weeks, but the financial piece will take it so much further than what we can do, okay? I apologize that we've gone over today. I'm not even going to have the worship team come up. They're like, oh, man. Okay? We're going to get you out of here. Thank you for hanging with me the whole way. Thank you for sticking with me. Would you stand with me this morning? We'll close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you. The answers we need for life are found in your book. You're so generous to us. You give and give and give and give. Help us to be generous. Lord, I pray today that anyone who may be offended by the fact that we've talked about generosity or money, Lord, I just pray that you would help them to dig past all of that and catch what you're saying, because this is life-changing for the good. Help us to order our lives around generosity and live the truly blessed life. I pray your blessing upon your people this morning. Go with us today. Use us to be your hands and feet in a world that is lost and dying and desperately needs what we already have. I thank you for your people. I thank you for our time together this morning, and we pray your blessing as we go. In Christ's name, amen. God bless you. Have a great week.